Okay, now I can see most people seem to have joined us now, so we will commence. Once again, good morning, and first and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting on today. Despite being on Zoom, it is still very much a significant thing to acknowledge our elders, past, present, and future, and I wish to do that with all the respect in the world. I am currently on Darug Nation. I'm in Barramanna land, here in Parramatta, and I am very much keen to work through this with our Indigenous leaders, with our Aboriginal elders. We're very grateful to have a great team of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders on team here at Western Sydney Community Forum who we work very closely with. So keen to continue these conversations and discussions with our elders and our other Indigenous and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues. So if there's anyone in the room, in the virtual room today, who identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, wish to give you a very warm welcome to today's session. So with that, as you know, today is this session this morning is the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety Brief, done by yours truly, Western Sydney Community Forum. Throughout the session today, you'll see a few of us, seeing who's in the room so far. Someone here knows one of us, I'm sure. We are very much active in the community care space, supporting the ageing and disability sector across Western Sydney. So as the regional peak for Western Sydney, always looking at how we can best support our sector. And this was one of the things that we thought of that may be helpful for you as service providers or someone who just wants a little bit more information about the Royal Commission. So with that, I'm going to introduce one of our Sector Support and Development team members, Anita Hanna, who is a manager from Western Sydney Community Forum. So Anita, if you want to throw your camera on, there we go.
Thanks, Nadiana. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd also like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're joining in our Zoom today. And I am on the wonderful, I'm in the wonderful Darug Nation, along with Nadi, just a few desks down from her. And I would like to acknowledge elders past, present, and future, and also extend my respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining in the Zoom today. So as Nadi said, we're here for the Western Sydney briefing on the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety. Sometimes you'll hear us refer to it as the Aged Care Royal Commission. This is, it's such an important thing to look at. So we don't often get Royal Commissions, but when we do, we really watch the recommendations that come through. Anyone working in aged care knows the sector reform that we've seen in recent years absolutely changed the way that aged care services are delivered. And I'm sure that whether you're a residential aged care provider or a Commonwealth home support program provider or anyone working with older people in Western Sydney, you will be interested to see what the new developments may be in the aged care space. So the Royal Commission has resulted in 148 recommendations to government, and those recommendations are currently being considered by government at this time, and the outcome will be announced on the 31st of May. Now, I'd like to commend our Sector Support and Development team, particularly Nadiana Albister, but also Charlton One, Camille Derriman and Hazrat Mehmadali, who have read through thousands of pages to attempt to bring you a summary of the recommendations that have been put forward. Why is this important? Why should we watch this space? Well, quite frankly, there's a lot in there that will impact on service delivery to older people and how we do it, how agencies are funded, the rights and expectations for older people in receiving care. There are all sorts of things, and you'll get to hear all about those recommendations today. And I have no doubt that as a sector in Western Sydney, we will collectively be considering these recommendations and discussing the impacts at our community care forums, at our leaders mixes, and other opportunities where we can get together. So we're all watching this space to see what the announcement will be on the 31st of May. But in the meantime, it's really important that you are armed with the knowledge of these recommendations and what they may mean for you. We will endeavour to keep the sector informed. I have no doubt that the team will do that. And I again would like to commend and congratulate the team on really swiftly bringing this briefing together today. So thank you to all of you, and especially Nadiana for making this happen. All the best with the briefing, and I'm keen to engage in discussions with you all into the future. Handing over back to Nadiana.
Thank you, Anita. Thanks very much for that. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce the rest of our team. So we also have Camille Derriman on team. We've got Hazrat Mehmedeli, and we've got Charlton One. Our team here, we hopefully look familiar to you. Hopefully you know some of us. If not, get to know us. Each of us are very keen to support the sector. Of course, the aged care sector and the Commonwealth Home Support Program service providers, but the broader sector across the community in Western Sydney. So any questions that you have, anything that you're not quite sure about where to turn or who to go to, hi, we're your people. So come to us. We're keen to have a chat. We may not have all the answers, and that's one thing I really want to make clear about today. We don't have all the answers. We're human. We weren't on the commission. We're not lawyers. We're not experts in this space. We're here to support the sector with interpreting and understanding this information in this Royal Commission. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. All four of us will be here on screen, so you get to look at our fun faces, pulling funny looks or whatnot. So feel free to engage the chat function. At the end, we'll have a big Q&A session, and there will be opportunity to engage with us through Mentimeter. I'll talk you all through that later on, but really want to give you this briefing now. So I'm going to share my screen in just one moment. And what I'm going to do is, as I said, a disclaimer. And a disclaimer on the fact that we're not the experts. And I'm going to share my screen right this moment. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that. If you're having any technical issues, I know a few people were having some technical issues, just put it into the chat function to us as the speakers, sorry, blanked there, as the speakers, and we'll be able to help you. The four of us are behind the scenes here, so we can support with whatever you need. As I said, disclaimer, this is an overview. It's not all the answers. We don't have all the answers as a sector support development team here at Western Sydney Community Forum, but at the moment, no one really does. We'll see shortly throughout the presentation that there's a lot yet to be learnt, and there's a lot of information that is still up for interpretation, information that we still don't know much about, and things that have been mentioned throughout the Royal Commission recommendations and through the many, I think it's 8 textbooks. I've got here the summary, which is 300 and something pages, but it's thousands of pages long in total. There's a lot of areas where none of us know where to turn or what to think of. It's all interpretation. So that before we move on, I really wanted to let everyone know that this is as a team, as in our organisation, our interpretation of the Royal Commission. It's an informed and educative interpretation, but still not the be all and end all. I would really recommend searching through other resources as well. Get to know who the peaks are, whether it's COTA, whether it's AXA, whoever it is in this space, to hear other opinions, because there are many perspectives and many opinions in everything, but in particular in this Aged Care Royal Commission. So with that, I'm going to throw to one of our sector support development team. Camille is going to go through a few things with you now. Thank you, Camille.
Hi, thanks, Nettie. And I just want to, before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that I'm on Darawal land, and I want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and future, as well as any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues we have today. So in terms of quality regulation, it's been mentioned that to recommend quality regulators and accreditations for high-level home care services, also periodical reports, just to be able to for consistent monitoring and reporting purposes. Also, 20% interview rate, graded assessment and performance ratings, complaints management to be improved and managed, as at the moment it doesn't meet the standard that it should be meeting, and increased enforcement powers, infringement notices as well. So in terms of data research, innovation and technology, as we know now, technology is a big part of our lives, and investing in technology to support the new aged care system will be crucial to be able to support aged care clients and the organisations that support them as well. Service-wide client relationship management systems as well, integrating with the My Health record, standardized systems and tools, greater use of assistive and smart technologies, and aged care ICT strategy as well. So all of this coming under innovation and technology, just to try and be able to support the aged care system. So I'm just going to hand it over to Hazra now for her section. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Camille. Hi, everybody. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today. I am on Darug land and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and would like to warmly welcome anybody who may be of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander background joining us today. I have the information regarding aged care accommodation. The Royal Commission has identified that by the 1st of July 2020, a comprehensive set of national aged care design principles and guidelines should be introduced, phasing out of the refundable accommodation deposit for new residents, and shifting the source of capital from accommodation to refundable accommodation deposits. Moving on from that, aged care for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, it is recommended that it is culturally respectful and safe. It is of high quality. It is trauma informed, which is so important, is on a needs-based and flexible service arrangement, and that there is access to interpreters. Cultural safety and system governor. Really interesting that CODA shared their ideas on the entire Royal Commission late yesterday. You may or may not have seen. They were as confused about the system governor proposal as we are, but what we've taken from it is that it requires regular training, cultural safety and trauma-informed service delivery, and that it's applied to all employees. program streams, funding streams under the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander aged care pathway, making funds available for any residential aged care provider, establishing, maintaining and using infrastructure equaling connection between the residential facility and communities on country. For example, video conferencing technology. I think, as Camille mentioned, technology is so important at the moment. Aged care in regional, rural and remote areas, multi-purpose service program, where is service supply not being reached? So making sure that we're really getting into those hard to reach places, planning and supplementing service to meet such needs, individuals subject to the same eligibility and needs assessments, combined aged care and health services. Oops. Access to healthcare. This one's a big one. So from the 31st of December 2021, the Royal College of General Practitioners to amend their standards and accreditation of general practices, moving into the aged care in residential aged care facilities and in their own homes. From the beginning of January next year, 2022, Australian and state territory governments will inform local hospital network-led multidisciplinary outreach services. The recommendation is that this is funded through National Health Reform Agreement, that there is 24-hour-a-day on-call services available, specific Medicare benefits, schedule items, comprehensive health assessment, Medicare benefits, sorry, excuse me, schedule funded specialist telehealth services for home care, necessary equipment and clinically and culturally capable staff and clinically appropriate subacute rehabilitation. Aged care and disability. By the 1st of July 2024, every person receiving aged care who is living with disability should receive through the aged care program daily living supports and outcomes equivalent to those available under the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Requirement of the Disability Discrimination Commissioner and the Aged Discrimination Commissioner as part of the new National Disability Strategy to report annually to the Parliament on quantity and accessibility of population receiving care. And that's it from me, handing over to Charlton. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Hazrat, and thank you very much, everybody, for being here today. I am Charlton, and my friends and colleagues from the Nepean and West Cumberland and Parramatta regions. Very happy to see you guys in attendance today, and I too want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're all meeting on today, and I'd also like to pay respects to our elders past, present and emerging, as well as extend my respect and acknowledgement to our friends and colleagues in the room today. Now, look, the first part I'll be looking at today is the younger people in residential aged care. Now, we've always talked about this as being quite an issue, and a lot of, while it's a fix and a bandage at the moment, it's not a long-term outcome for these younger people, and by younger people I mean people under 65. So with that, essentially what the Royal Aged Care Commission looks into is really moving people under the age of 65 out of residential aged care, and on top of that, restricting, or not just restricting, but stopping people under 65 moving into residential aged care. So hopefully the goal here is by 2022. So firstly, all people under the age of 5 is moved out, is transitioned out of residential aged care locations, as well as no people under the age of 65. So under 45, sorry, nobody enters, and under 65, nobody enters the system, and under 45 lives in residential aged care. So through that itself, funding will be dedicated to the transitional periods for these younger people, and specifically in terms of short-term and long-term accommodation, but that's based on people who aren't eligible for the NDIS, and they're also currently living at the risk of entering residential aged care. So on top of that, what the Commission recommends is to dedicate individualised advocacy to these people, especially of those again that the at-risk population group of moving into residential aged care who are under 65. As a part of governance as well as responsibility, a 6-month report will be provided to the Minister. While we don't know what that report will entail, we assume that it'd be firstly at least basic numbers about who's still in residential aged care and who will be moved out of, and that transitional number statistics will be included in the report. So moving on from there, in terms of workforce, now workforce, very important to a lot of us. I mean, you know, on the very basic selfish level, of it's about pays, it's about qualifications, it's about keeping our jobs. So in terms of that, look, long-term workforce modelling is being trialled at the moment. Some of these recommendations have already been taken up previously, before the report was even pushed out. So the modelling itself, the Commission, depending on who's actually taking charge of this kind of role, will be working together with community consultation, community tertiary education, as well as kind of looking at what the strategy will be moving forward in terms of an interim workforce strategy and planning that framework from 2022 to 2025. Now, after that period, we're looking at a longer 10-year strategy, and so hopefully that'll give us more stability in terms of moving forward over the next at least 10 to 15 years. Now, an independent reviewer has been set up, and they are the Aged Care Workforce Industry Council. They're an independent organisation funded by the federal government, and basically they're looking at really looking at us as workers. Essentially standardizing job titles, job grades and definitions, developing a map career progression, because I mean at this stage, just because you enter the workforce doesn't mean you know what your next steps are, and they're really looking at a system that awards you know, working in aged care and a scope for them to progress their career, instead of, you know, that ultimate job bounce that we always do in the system we know today. Within that itself, they're again similar to what I mentioned earlier. They'll be working with the tertiary education providers like yourselves, and as well as, you know, other peak bodies to really design a system that works for us, and you know, hopefully, which means at the end of the day, increase in award wages, which is a great thing, as well as equal remuneration for both male and female workers, which I mean, in this current sphere and discourse we're in at the moment in terms of government, it's absolutely needed. So a review of the Cert 3 and Cert 4 program will be done by 2022, just to really keep in line with all the needs that are required now, and basically around building core competencies for the certifications for Cert 3 and 4. And on top of that, basically what they want to implement is that a standard is provided across. So wherever a client comes in to receive services, they get a similar level of service across the board. And to do this, by 2023, there will be a standardized in terms of funding for upskilling workers, as well as opportunities for placements for, you know, students who are studying the Cert 3 and Cert 4. Now, hopefully, again, this is to stabilize our industry for the next 10 to 15 years. So hopefully that'll work out. So moving on from there, we're looking at the informal, so in terms of informal carers and volunteers. So the Royal Commission has recommended a national registration scheme for workers. Basically, so that national registration scheme will include stuff around the minimum qualifications, which is a Cert 3, looking at, again, ongoing training requirements, minimum levels of English proficiency, as well as criminal history screening. It's great that they're looking at that, at least the criminal history screening, just given that the previous inquiries we've had into elder abuse and that line of investigation. and especially the current government kind of priorities into aged care abuse. Not just aged care abuse, but older abuse. So there are also, while they're looking at a minimum standard in training requirements or qualifications, previous experience and prior learning will be considered. And so workers who have been in this industry for an extended period of time, who may not have those qualifications, can either up to my interpretation at the moment is that you'll either be provided, say, advanced standing in terms of certain certifications or qualifications, or you'll be allowed to continue on, provided that you can, say, meet the standard that's provided. So looking on now, again, looking more internally, we're looking at governance. So with governance, they're like the specialist homelessness services. The Royal Commission has really put forward changes to how we govern our organizations, and really just looking to, again, treat it as a standardization, and to make sure that our organizations are well run and well led. So some of these include prescriptions in terms of board makeup, notification, requiring organizations to let the commissioner know that if there are changes to the board structure. So the previous disqualified individual test has now will be replaced with a fit and proper person test, and to then and by July of this year, leadership to providers and managers have a minimum level of qualification. So really similar to aligning to the earlier parts about the workforce itself. And then also kind of in terms of building organizational culture, wanting to have plans in place to support staff training, engagement and team building, to really kind of, really fostering that ethos of if your organization and the workers involved are, well looked after, and, really work for the values of the organization, will then transfer to the client group. So on top of that, looking at a new governance standard, again, so around more maintenance of the organization in terms of quality systems, complaint systems, as well as risk management to be in place and be standardized across aged care providers. And look, they're not intending to really push this through as a, you need to get on top of this. They will provide assistance where it's needed to providers that may need that extra help in terms of understanding what governance systems look like and what they're expected to do. At this stage, nothing's been said in terms of what that'll look like. So hopefully that'll unfold. And because my perspective is that this is an area that government likes to push through first. So I'm assuming we may, and this is again my perspective, we might see this pushed through pretty soon, and at least we'll have more information on it in hopefully before July. So finally, in terms of the advocacy research and dissemination portion, I guess one of the good things here, and Nadiana, if you can swap to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. First and foremost, protection for whistleblowers. Really want to, I suppose this also goes into that risk management, as well as the ongoing protection side of the recommended changes to the aged care system moving forward. Looking at building capacity in education, especially within the systemic advocacy sections. So dedicated funding has been recommended to provide, capacity building and systemic advocacy. By 2021, in July, it's encouraged by the federal government. It encourages the federal government to enable a minimum of 5% of older people to have access to advocacy services, so that they can, really access the systems that they need, and hopefully, just really reach out to the harder to reach population groups itself. So on top of that, 1.8% of federal expenditure is recommended into aged care research. Now it's looking into areas such as innovation, into setting strategies and agendas for innovation, looking at target socioeconomic groups in aging, prevention and treatment of aging, as well as related health conditions. And so finally, it is recommended that a network be set up between research bodies, academics, industry, community organizations, and stakeholder groups as well. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Nadiana now, who will bring us towards the end of the session, as well as lead us into Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlton. Okay, so a lot of information so far, and please enjoy a nice blurry photo. That's my doing. I just noticed how low quality that is, and I did get told by one of my colleagues, and I believe that was Charlton, that I need to look for high definition photos. So if anyone wants to help me with my tech side of my skills, please, I'm open to feedback and open to getting more information around that. As Charlton said, we're going to be going through the end of this section. Now, a heads up, the end of it is the most detailed, and I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. If you've got questions, I see there's a few questions coming up in the Q&A. Please put them into the Q&A now, put it into the chat function, and we will be addressing those towards the end of this presentation. There will be an opportunity for discussion. So if you don't want to lose your train of thought and you want to remember what you wanted to ask, please feel free to put that into the Q&A. So what I'm going to present to you now is the financial side of things. What money is needed, what recommendations have been made in regards to how much money, where that's going, where's that coming from. So there's a lot of questions. And at the moment, we're in that grey area. We're in that phase of transition and recommendations where the recommendations have been made, the Royal Commission's been released. However, the government hasn't necessarily made any clear statements yet, and they don't need to yet until the 31st of May, about what's going to be picked up and what will not be a high priority. So I'm going to walk through this with you now, and I am sure there's going to be questions coming up, and as I said, we may be able to answer them, we may not be. The one good thing, or maybe bad thing, depends how you see it, our team's quite honest. I too am quite honest, so if we can't answer it, we'll try and find the information for you and answer it at a later stage. So I'm going to hit next if I can. There we go. So the aged care finance, I'm going to make sure, yes, okay. So one of the recommendations made, and there was a fair bit around this, was the pricing authority. Ensuring that there is an independent pricing authority and pricing body. So making sure that's not part of a department, not part of government necessarily, may fall under government, but making sure it's got its independent stream there, that there's no conflict of interest or anything there. So that's one very clear recommendation that was made. Few of the other recommendations that came under this pricing authority section was to determine prices of services in a way that's actually able to enable Parliament to disallow or reject. So an example of this is through a piece of legislation such as regulation, rules, or determinations. So pretty much saying there should be a pricing authority. That's the recommendation that the two commissioners have made and the Royal Commission's made, and that these prices need to be something that are still regulated by Parliament, that this pricing authority is still getting checks and balances by the government, but still is able to make independent decisions and recommendations and set prices. There was another recommendation about a minister, so new determination of prices through the same way. So ensuring there's someone overseeing that, ensuring there's someone who is accountable and who's able to answer for questions, especially at this beginning, as we know, transition in the aged care sector. We know where I was in a meeting yesterday afternoon through one of our counterparts in the Hunter. Jeanette, shout out to you if you're watching this, but one of the sessions that she hosted, and we got asked by the facilitator and presenter, Phil, how we see our aged care sector and to describe it as an animal. There was a few, there was chameleon, there was, I said cat, and there was one that was a sitting duck as well. So there's we're looking very chilled and relaxed above water, but under the water and under the waterline, we're paddling away, making sure things are happening, making sure we can make everything run smoothly. And the chameleon was quite interesting. We're used to adapting. We can adapt to the environment. We're able to change. We're able to grow and develop our services and our system. So ensuring that there's a minister and a governing body of sorts working alongside this new pricing authority, and ensuring that that is something that ministers able to, and this is my interpretation, ministers able to support the sector, support the community, support the country through this system. We've seen it in the NDIS, we've seen it in the My Aged Care system, in the aged care system, we've seen it across many different service changes and service system changes as well. So that's something that has been recommended. Another recommendation in line with this is that prices are determined by unit independent from the aged care sector and the government. So that ensuring that this is not something that's falling within the government, it's not something that's within the aged care sector, it's something completely independent and is informing government, is informing the aged care sector through this pricing. The recommendation is that this occurs by the 1st of July 2023. When I was first going through the Royal Commission, when it dropped on the Monday, 1st of March, I believe, I was going through the dates. I'm like, 2023 sounds like forever away, but we're already in 2021. So the recommendations being made are, it may sound like it's a long time away from now, but time passes quickly, especially with a lot of these recommendations being made. Things need to start moving quite quickly, and we'll see a lot of that coming after the 31st of May, and seeing what comes from that. There was another section around the aged care finance, which was the residential aged care fees. There was quote 125 in particular quoted that, recommendation 125, quoted that individuals who are assessed as needing residential care should not be required to contribute to the cost of the care component of that support. So essentially saying that in the residential aged care space, we're not talking Commonwealth Home Support Program, and we're not talking about in-home care, people who are still living within their own homes and receiving external services that are coming into their homes and receiving those services through these organisations, as we know under the CHSP model. This is more, of course, the residential aged care. And ensuring that individuals who are actually being assessed and needing residential aged care don't need to contribute to the cost of that care component. So ensuring that there's a form of that payments made on behalf of them. Big glaring question mark for me is, where is that coming from? There's already been recommendations made, and I'm sure you've all seen that about the 5-star ratings for residential aged care. You've probably heard on the news or through your media sources about the tax levy. There's a lot of recommendations that have been made, and we'll go into that in a little moment. Also, in regards to residential aged care fees, ensuring that eligible residents will actually be paying an amount to their provider as determined by the means test. So whatever amount that is actually paid by the resident, ensuring that's actually done through a means testing. So seeing how much their assets, ensuring that this means test is able to capture their financial situation and circumstance, and being able to tailor their payment to this means test. Ensuring that the government, another recommendation, is that the government is to supply a gap funding. And also that the prices, as we mentioned in the previous slide, is determined by this new pricing authority, however that may look. And this is one of the things that we know about in the Royal Commission, and it happens in many Royal Commissions, unfortunately or fortunately. There's room for discretion, there's room for interpretation, and there are some recommendations that are very specific, others that are more broad. And these broad recommendations is where government is able to interpret that and move in the most feasible way. Make that as you wish. And that's just one of the things about the Royal Commission. There's recommendations made, and it's just about how that moves forward. A little bit of a change in colours here. So we've got here, in terms still the aged care finance, that until the 1st of July 2025, 4 years from now, that approved providers will be able to charge residents ineligible for the accommodation supplement and refundable accommodation deposit or an equivalent daily accommodation payment up to the provisional accommodation charge limit. So putting a cap to the charge of accommodation for that provisional, that limits, that cap, is yet to be determined, is yet to be set. As far as I'm aware, if anyone knows of any information, please let's support one another. If you know that that cap's been announced, please share that information. We can let the rest of the sector know as well. But to date, that has not been released yet. So ensuring that residential aged care facilities aren't charging an arm and a leg more than what they may already have to be charging, that there is a cap, there's a limit, I enjoy my sport. There's a salary cap of how much you can charge and spend. So there is that in that place. Another recommendation under this section is that after the 1st of July 2025, ineligible residents will actually be charged a daily accommodation payment up to the level of the provisional accommodation charge limits. So ensuring that there's that blue tab that you're seeing at the top of the screen, that's step 1 of this transition to residential aged care. Step 2, that middle green one. And then moving forward, that residents should not be denied high quality care, even if they cannot afford it. And I think us as workers of this sector, of the broad community sector, if you're in this sector, chances are you care about individuals, you care about the community, you care about quality of life. And I think that's one of the key recommendations that came out of this report, and one of the key suggestions that they've mentioned in this was that there is a need for these caring quality service providers in residential, in Commonwealth Home Support Program, in whichever form of aged care service providers there are. In the broad aged care sector, there is the need for quality aged care service providers to be supported. And I suppose that comes in many different ways, through sector support of what we're doing, like, for example, now, but also support from government, support through funding, support through whichever means is determined. So the reason for this is to ensure that these residents and these individuals who are going into care are not denied of this high quality care. And that's a very key aspect of this section of the Royal Commission, that high quality level of care must be there. It must remain, and that must be supported, even if the individual cannot afford it. This means test that I mentioned earlier on. So the means test for this space is testing how much should be charged per resident out of pocket. So we know in a lot of the residential aged care, but also particularly in the Commonwealth Home Support Program, it's not free. Receiving aged care services is not free. It is not covered by government completely, but it is heavily subsidised. So this subsidy would determine how much is subsidised, would determine on this means test, and how much, therefore, the resident or the individual is having to pay out of pocket. The amount worked out under the income test is something that we know. This means test is working in line with the income test, whether it's your pension, whether it's your superannuation, whichever form of income, whether it's rental income that the older person has, whichever forms of income, that's how it's worked out. 25 or 50% of the highest amount of paying a partial pension. What that means, or the asset test, which is 3.9 or 7.8%. This is greater than ordinary loss of living top-up subsidy. So it's more than that. That there is no more caps on contributions payable. So what this is saying is the Royal Commission has provided a recommendation around how much should be subsidised, how much should be covered based on the means test and on the asset test. Now, the Royal Commission this wonderful document. I keep looking over to my right because I can see the pile of our hard copies that we've ordered in the office. We've had Commissioner Pajone and Commissioner Briggs. Both of them, despite it being the one Royal Commission, there have been some discrepancies amongst the two. They're two individuals who are two very qualified individual people, and the Honourable Gaetano Pajone and Miss Linnell Briggs, both of them have their own opinions and own perspectives as to how things should be moving forward. So this slide here is a financial oversight and prudential regulation. Commissioner Pajone recommended that it is dependent on government leadership model, that the rectifying the financial oversight and prudential regulation is dependent on the government leadership model. Also, there was a recommendation made by him about that from the 1st of July, 2022, so just over a year from now, that there should be a number of financial oversight and prudential regulation arrangements that may be implemented. So saying that even though things may have gone wrong in the past and may have not been as fair to the eyes of the community, there is room now post Royal Commission to make amendments to allow for there to be a prudential regulation arrangement to be implemented, as well as a number of financial oversight. Commissioner Briggs mentioned about this system governor that we were talking about and has alluded to before. There wasn't much information placed on system governor, but a handful of experts in the space have talked about this, and we've talked about it within our team, what this system governor role looks like, what this new piece of the puzzle will look like. And that hasn't really been fleshed out just yet. It hasn't necessarily been done by the Royal Commission. Commissioner Briggs mentioned that the system governor is to be responsible, is to be given responsibility, for providers having the financial capacity to deliver the services. So there was a fair bit of talk about how that may look, whether that's going to be something that is to support aged care providers in terms of their services, in terms of their financial capacity, obviously, as Commissioner Briggs has mentioned. But also, she went on to say that the prudential regulator is to create and enforce prudential standards. So this regulator, however this may look, is to actually outline standards that are to be followed by the aged care sector. And we know standards, we know we know 8 standards, we know how this works, we've got the pretty wheels, but maybe adding an extra layer for this space in particular. Also, she went on to explain that to ensure that providers have sufficient capital and liquidity. And that the prudential regulator has the power, or may have the power, to investigate providers' financial matters. So the financial space of providers and their finances, if there's something that comes up, there's an issue with that this prudential regulator is able to investigate that. Finally, went on to explain that the providers are to comply with continuous disclosure. For example, tell the regulator that they can't pay their debts when they become aware of this fact. The honesty policy, that there is that communication and a free-flowing communication. Now, we know in this, by being in this sector, and we know it in many different workforces as well in industries, it takes 2 to tango. The communication is to occur both ways. So what I've interpreted from this is that, yes, providers are to inform the prudential regulator, but also that the regulator, if there's changes, as there will be, to inform that also to providers. So providers are fully aware and informed about how to move forward and which decisions they are to make. The levy. Okay, so there's been lots of talk, and I think this is what you often find with Royal Commissions, that people, unless they're in the sector, they don't really seem to care. Your average Joe, your neighbour down the road, may not really know that there was a Royal Commission. We know there's currently a Royal Commission into the disability sector as well, as we speak. But unless you're in this space, unless you have skin in the game, chances are you don't really know much about what's going on because it's not necessarily shared broadly. But when there's money involved and when there's levies and taxes involved, people tend to perk up. I noticed this as soon as the Royal Commission dropped on the 1st of March, that this was a hot topic. And it still is a bit of a hot topic when talking about this Royal Commission. There's a lot of interest. So the recommendation that was made in the Royal Commission is that from the 1st of July 2022, legislation is to establish an aged care improvement levy, a flat rate of 1% of taxable personal income. This has been received by the government, and the initial reaction to it said, we need to look into this further. They didn't deny it, as far as I'm concerned, nor confirm this recommendation and accept it. And as we know, none of this is necessarily going to happen until the 31st of May. Another recommendation made in terms of the aged care improvement levy is that it is to be paid for on the following financial year, 1st of July 2023. So there's a transition phase. It's not just going to happen and people are going to be taxed at 1% immediately. There will be a transitional phase and stage of this space for this transition, for this aged care improvement levy to be implemented. And for this levy to be based on the Medicare Levy Act from 1986. So all well informed, but again, watch this space. We don't know what's going to happen just yet. So, wonderful. We've got all these things and we know what needs to be done, but how is this actually going to be funded? How is the aged care system, or how should the aged care system be funded? As you can read on the slide for yourself, there is a recommendation to amend the indexation arrangements for home care and Commonwealth Home Support Program, the CHSP. There's also the indexation arrangements which recommendations for care subsidies and viability supplements to therefore be increased by the 1st of July each year. So not just as of this next financial year, but at the beginning of each financial year for this viability supplement and care subsidy to be increased. The viability supplement has been recommended for it to be continued to increase 30%. There's also been a recommendation around the reimbursement providers for the cost of training staff until independent pricing begins. So in that transitional phase, for there to be reimbursement for service providers to train their staff. Charlton spoke about the workforce. Wonderful. We need to train our staff members. We need to train our workers who've been in the sector for 30 plus years and they need to be upskilled. That's great. How's that going to happen? We know this has been a huge gap in our aged care system since I've been here at the forum for the last 6 or so years. I've seen this at every regional community care forum and leaders mixes that we host. Wonderful, there's training. How do I release my on-the-ground staff and my grassroots workers to actually receive this training? Because if we move someone, as you know, away to training, how do you replace that person providing the direct service to our community, to our residents, to our people of our suburbs? So that is ensuring that would be able to ease that financial burden of that replacement and being able to backfill our workers and replace temporarily our staff members whilst they're receiving that training. It may be for an hour, it may be for a day, it may be for one Friday. Maybe a staff member wants to do Generation Community through Western Sydney Community Forum, and it's one Friday every month for 6 months. So you need to replace someone in the meantime, and this reimbursement would allow that. This also led to the supports, respite, assistive technology, and home modifications to be a mixture of block and activity-based funding. And I'll speak to that in just a moment. I just want to read the next point, which is the new funding model for care at home being individualized budget or case mix classification. Now, what this means, we have seen in the past, pre-2015, that the aged care system was essentially fully funded and subsidised by governments, whether it's federal, state, local, different tiers of government. After 2015, from 2015 onwards, there's been a change, and that change was to make it individualised, similar to the NDIS, but not quite at that level of individualised funding. This Royal Commission and Commissioner Briggs and Commissioner Pajone have both mentioned that extreme and this other extreme aren't necessarily working. Neither of these have worked and have been as effective as what we've hoped for. So what's been recommended here is a mix of both. And that is one of the key things that as the sector support and regional peak for Western Sydney, we've seen this. We've seen, I think sometimes you need to go from one extreme to the other extreme to realise you need to get back into the middle. And I think that's where we're heading. And again, that's my interpretation, that's my hope, that there is a mix of government funding and subsidised services as well as individualised funding. So that is that in terms of how it's going to be funded. Moving us on, there was more information about the funding for a person receiving at-home care should be based on a person's assessed needs, but should not exceed the funding if they were assessed for care at a residential facility. So what this means, if you're receiving Commonwealth Home Support Program and you are if you're receiving care at home, this person should be able to have their needs assessed. But this funding, this money, this allowance should not exceed if you were to be assessed under the residential facility. So whilst being in a residential facility. Providers funded for residential aged care through a case mix classification system. For example, the ANACC. It's been a long day, as you can see. So ensuring that for residential aged care, that there is a case mix classification system. Furthermore, there's information about the accountability principles 2014 to be amended to require providers to report on total direct care staffing hours. What we're seeing here is more transparency. And I know when you read that, it may seem like, oh goodness, now there's going to be more reporting. There's more information that we need to move on to, and we need to report further, more paperwork, more documentation. But in the long run, this may mean that there's more transparency, there's more accountability, and there's more responsibility for service providers. And I think whether you're a service provider yourself or you're working in the aged care system, this is vital to ensure that the high quality care is there. We were talking about that in residential aged care, but the same goes in the Commonwealth Home Support Program. If you have someone providing domestic assistance in your home to your mother, to your father, to yourself, to a sister or a neighbour, you want to ensure that the service provider is of high quality, isn't just ticking a box and moving on, that actually wants to be there, wants to actually support that individual. So that's what the Royal Commission is hoping for through that accountability principles to be amended. Another one was the home care providers to be paid on accrual basis, as well as quarterly reporting to total the direct staffing hours. So reporting. It sounds daunting. It sounds like a pain in the backside. But as we said, that is maybe the way we need to move forward to ensure that elder abuse isn't as prominent in homes or in aged care system or in aged care facilities, residential aged care. There's also the recommendation of residents in aged care facilities to be required to contribute to the cost of their accommodation, as we mentioned previously, as well as financing scheme based upon hypothetical levy through taxation system, the tax that we were talking about in the previous slides. Moving us along, I'll try if it works. Okay. So enjoy the pretty pictures. I feel like these are a little bit better and of higher quality. So I'm going to move us, that's pretty much the entire Royal Commission and the key points that came. As I said at the beginning, through the disclaimer, these are our interpretations of the Royal Commission recommendations. If you want to do some reading, I highly recommend doing that. download the Royal Commission online, order yourself a hard copy, if you're working in an aged care facility or you're a Commonwealth Home Support Program service provider. I highly recommend and we highly recommend interpreting this information yourself. If you don't want to do that, let's wait. Let's wait and see what government does after 31st of May, by the 31st of May. So, reports on the recommendation. As I said, 31st of May, government will be reporting to Parliament about the recommendation outcome. So this is in that phase where on the 31st of March, we've got a couple of months. From 2 months from now, there will be a report made to Parliament by the government about what is the recommendation mean? What do these recommendations, what do each of these 148 recommendations? So watch this space, and we'll be able to hopefully provide more information to you about this. There's also information about reporting how it would be implemented or why it has been rejected. So through this reporting, it would be wonderful. We want to implement recommendation 24, for example. I just grabbed a recommendation as an example. But that recommendation 24, we are implementing because of X, Y, and Z. Or we are rejecting recommendation 24 because of this reason. So there needs to be clarification and justification behind each decision made by government. And this is what the Royal Commission has requested. The impact of this, it will guide future steps for aged care reform. It feels like we're at the tail end of the aged care reforms, but this is so much just at the beginning. We've seen so many reforms, but we're just in the midst of this process, I feel, and there's so much more that's going to be coming up. Again, an implementation unit and task force has been recommended by each of the commissioners. However, this is different depending who you speak to in regards to the two commissioners. Commissioner Pajone has mentioned that there was the need to be properly funded and resourced, and that it is dedicated to addressing and implementing the recommendations in the report that they've released. In this report, that it would actually be addressing each of these recommendations and implementing them. This would be pending to the establishment under the new Act of the Australian Aged Care Commission. However, and similarly or dissimilarly, however you may interpret that, Commissioner Briggs said that this is to be established by the Australian Department of Health and cross-supported by Deputy Secretary of Steering Committee on Aged Care Reform. Slightly different. So not saying that it is to be not saying that it is to have an individual component in terms of this payment and these resourcing, but to be fully established by the department, Australian Department of Health and Aged Care. And this is to address and implement the recommendations in the report. Same thing that Commissioner Pajone said, just different hows to the same outcome. Both will deal solely with these recommendations. It is unclear whether this task force will provide reports on the aged care sector or only to the government or a combination of both for the purpose of transparency. That's one key thing that this Royal Commission has going into it. That was a key intention. And now moving forward, the recommendations we see shows that there's a need for transparency, there's a need for accountability, there's a need for that responsibility for people to take, for people in aged care, residential aged care, people in the Commonwealth Home Support Program service providers, whoever you are, there needs to be that accountability and that transparency. And this is what they're hoping to achieve. The evaluation of the effectiveness. So reporting to the Parliament is to occur at least every 6 months. Again, doesn't mean this is necessarily going to happen. This is what was recommended, that there is regular reporting to Parliament biannually about the effectiveness of the recommendations that have been picked up or those that have been rejected. There was also the need to independently evaluate and report on the effectiveness of the actions 5 and 10 years down the track. So doing a review and evaluate what's happened. At the 5-year mark, 5 years after these recommendations have been implemented, and also 10 years. Has there been an improvement in our aged care system? Has there been a decline in service provision? Has there been an increase in service provision? Have more people been asking and requiring aged care support? Or has there been less people requiring aged care support because they're receiving the adequate support through, say, for example, Commonwealth Home Support Program before moving into residential aged care? And we know the data shows and the evidence has shown that more those who receive high quality Commonwealth Home Support Program are delayed in the progression of how frail they become, how much support they need, how many different services they require, and therefore the need to move into residential aged care is therefore prolonged. The impact of this, it's unclear what form of evaluation will actually take place. We don't know. And we don't know what role the aged care sector will play in this, in reporting the effectiveness from the ground level. There's many question marks. We just don't know whether it's going to be a top-down, bottom-up, or a combination of the two reporting. So we are just not sure about that at this stage. So that is all of the Royal Commission information. What's happened so far? What's happened so far is that the government has responded. The government's responded initially, I believe the day after on the Tuesday, about what's going to happen. And I've set these out in terms of the cost. So the government has already committed $279.9 million to residential care sustainability, 92 million to the workforce, as well as 32 million to quality and safety in residential aged care, $30.1 million to governance oversight, standards and accountability, and $18 million to home care packages. This is to fast track the wait list, to fast track the demand of services that we're seeing and we are also aware of. You can read this slide for yourself and the specifics of what's come, but this is what's been done so far. What will the world look like post-Royal Commission, post the 31st of May? The honest answer is we don't know. We don't know how many of these recommendations are going to be accepted, if any. We've seen there's already been some funding, which is fantastic from that previous slide, already some funding. But does this mean that we are relying on funding and resources to go into the aged care system to better the quality of our aged care system and the wait times of aged care system, or should we fix the governance issues first and the accountability challenges that we're facing and the reporting challenges that service providers are facing first? Honestly, from the conversations that I've been involved in with experts and with other leaders in the aged care space, the suggestion is that both need to happen simultaneously. Both the resourcing and the funding needs to occur whilst the improvement occurs. Because there's the argument, how do we improve the aged care system without this funding? And then the funding of, let's just pouring money and hope that the service system just fixes itself and the market adjusts. My personal opinion and perspective on this is that both need to happen side by side. What we do know is that investment in technology and technological innovations will occur as the world advances. We know that. We've seen it through Zoom. We're having this conversation now through Zoom. We also know that service providers are to constantly reevaluate their value proposition, constantly evaluate the quality of services, whether you're a CHSP provider or a HCP provider, residential, whoever you are, there is that need to constantly reevaluate what we're doing. And there are many people who are doing a fantastic job of that. I know many different service providers in our Western Sydney region that are fantastic in evaluating regularly and reevaluating what they're doing and how they're doing that. So I can just see that continuing post-Royal Commission. There's also the need for dementia-affected residents and their families to be considered. Throughout all of this, there was some talk about our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. A little bit of talk about culturally linguistically diverse communities. And in the Royal Commission, there was some talk about the dementia residents. There's high need to support people, not as a blanket, not through a blanket form, but actually as individuals. We know this. We know this has occurred, and this has been intended through the reforms that we've seen in the last 5 to 6 years. But we need to continue doing that, and we need to continue reminding ourselves that this is someone's mother, this is someone's father, this is someone's daughter, this is someone, not just someone's relative or friend. This is a person who is deserving of high quality care. So, with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the moment. What I would like to ask each of you in the room, I can see there's a fair few of you here. There is I've got here a Mentimeter that I'd like for you to participate in. I'll just see if I can pull that up. Oops. Okay, just one moment, please. I'll swap and share the screen of the Mentimeter now. And if you can grab your smartphone, if you're on a laptop, open up your web browser, whatever you've got. And what you'll see in just a moment is a question that I've got on screen. If you've got that web browser, please open up your Google, your Ecosia, whichever you have. I heard one of our colleagues saying DuckDuckGo, I believe it was our CEO, whichever your search platform is, and search menti.com. You can see this at the top of your screen here that I'm sharing, menti.com. And at this stage, I might ask the rest of our team, if you want to pop your cameras on, feel free to do so, and we can talk through these, what comes through. Oh, this is exciting. You never know what you're going to find on the other side of the screen. I see Hazret has put on a blazer, so this is fantastic. It's just peekaboo, we're here. Okay, so hopefully you're able to get through on menti.com, and you'll have also the code. If you'll be asked for a code 1423408.
I'll just quickly mention that Miguel asked who do they need to contact to get a hard copy of the report. If you navigate to the Q&A portion as well, you'll be able to see my response. Basically, you can order hard copies through the Aged Care Royal Commission website itself. Yeah, it'll take you to another link and you can order your hard copies of the report itself. And Nadiana, would you like to share whether the participants today have access to the slides?
I was going to hope people could I would keep them up by thinking about this. I know people are going to lose lots of sleep. No, you will have access to the slides. I'm only kidding. Each of you who have been here today, you'll receive an email, just a thank you email for participating. And after this session, we are going to finish shortly in the next 10 minutes or so. So there will be information there and you'll have access to each of these slides. There are also, this is currently being recorded. So you may see a little red button going like that. So any mistake I've made, any mistake Charlton or Hazret or Camille's made is being recorded forever. Don't we love technology, guys? They'll be on YouTube. We'll also share the link to that YouTube so you can share it with your networks if it was helpful. If it wasn't, just leave it. Just ignore it. Make us feel a little bit better. You'll see here on, I just want to make sure, guys, can you all see the screen that I'm sharing? Wonderful, thank you. So the question on Menti, if you have any issues with menti.com, please put it in the chat function or the Q&A. We'll try and help you. But any web browser, menti.com, insert that code that's at the top of the screen. And the question that'll pop up is, what are your initial thoughts in response to this Royal Commission? Whether it's the information that we've just shared with you today, or it's the information that you've read yourself or heard a different organisation share what it is. And I'm sick of talking. I might throw it over to yourself. Hazret, do you want to read what's on the screen so I can mute myself?
Sure. Some of the thoughts that we've got in response to Nadi's question is that it's a start, but there have still been issues over the last couple of weeks of neglect, etc. Improvements will take so long to implement. Great summary, some good outcomes, however, still a lot to do. I love it. Too many cowboys in the space. Time for them to move on.
I'd like to quickly mention that in our Q&A box, Miguel has, in terms of responding to your question around, are we judging the response from the government or from the sector? So in regards to this question, this is in regards to the Royal Commission itself. So it's with the government and, and the government's kind of response to what they notice in the sector.
Yeah, and look, the purpose of this is just to get a conversation going. If you want to raise your hand and you've got any comments, by all means, please raise your hand on Zoom. We'll allow you to speak. We kind of get tired of our own voices. I know I do. But please raise your hand if you want to participate. Just a discussion around, what do you think? What does this mean to you? Are you a service provider? Have you considered these recommendations? Do you think this is a good move? Yeah. I'll also say, oh, sorry, Hazrat.
I was just going to say, new comment, very comprehensive, has included in-home and out-of-home care. I am particularly pleased that there has been a focus on quality care and individual care.
I mean, I'm supposed to add to that in terms of what I mentioned before around the review of the Cert 3 and the Cert 4 in terms of care. I mean, there has been, the report has recommended 2 specific areas that they want to kind of really focus on. And so that's in terms of personal care modules, trauma-informed care, cultural safety, mental health, physical health statuses, wound care, oral health, palliative care, falls prevention, first aid, monitoring, medication, and dysphagia and management. The second thing that the report really recommends in terms of education as well is in terms of the quality of life and well-being. So that's including the use of technology, interventions for older people, people at risk, and as well as recognizing and responding to crisis situations as well. I hope that helps in terms of guiding what we might be looking into in terms of upskilling our workers, especially in terms of individual care and home and out-of-home care.
Thanks, Charlton. And I think that I know we're passionate about that here at Western Sydney Community Forum, not just the 4 of us that you're seeing today or Anita, but our entire team. How do we better support you guys? How do we upskill our sector? How do we ensure that our sector has the skills and knowledge required for the ever-changing world that we're faced with? So I know, like, an example that's just coming to mind, and Camille, I'm looking at you and Charlton as well, because we both did the training. ACON has been doing some fantastic training, the Silver Rainbow training, around, and shout out to you guys if you want, like, you're welcome. That wasn't even paid. But just like, they're doing some great work in terms of residential aged care, and Silver Rainbow training is simply, how do you as a service provider better support an individual who may be from the LGBTIQ community, and how do you provide the best quality for them? So there's plenty of examples such as that.
I suppose that's a good segue into the next comment around many people who are part of the COLD community do not know or understand how to best utilise the home care package, which has resulted in high volumes of unspent funds or poor cash flow. Are there recommendations to resolve this issue? Have you guys come across any of that?
That's one of the, and I might just answer that because that's one of the criticisms that have been made about the Royal Commission throughout many of the meetings I've been a part of. There's been a lot of talk about mainstream community. Many of these recommendations are for all of community. There is some recommendations made for culturally and linguistically diverse communities and our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. These communities who may not be as equipped or able to access information or resources to better support themselves. I know I come from the culturally and linguistically diverse community, and if I know for my parents, for example, if it's not in Spanish, they're not going to be reading the information because they just really struggle with interpreting that information. So to allow them to be independent, resources need to be translated. So that really minimizes their particular choice and their level of choices and variety in service provision and service providers that they get to pick from, because they're limited to those that are translated to Spanish, for example. And like that I'm just using that as my example in my personal family situation. But there's many different examples like that. Hazra, I believe did you want to say something, or did I?
No, I was just going to say that there isn't a lot, unfortunately. So that's a real shame.
I mean, I suppose this kind of ties into the last one I think we've only got time to go through, which is I really value some of the recommendations as they are challenging the market views in public policy, and to go back to universal cover and increase taxes to fund public services properly. Absolutely agree. I mean, this has also implications into the wider kind of way we look at services in general, and I think it's really important that we start to use this in discourse, and especially within government discourse, to really move forward into universal services, and where people can access their services wherever they are across Australia and receive the same level of service.
Absolutely. With that, if anyone has any other questions right here, right now, any burning questions that you really want to ask, please raise your hand. We will try and address that immediately, and we'll allow you to speak. If not, you can always contact us. You can contact either one of us at our local community care forums, or the Western Sydney Community Care Forum that Hazrat coordinates, or the Leaders Mixers that she coordinates, or anywhere. You can email our team. You can email us at info@wscf.org.au. Before you head off, there is one thing that I would really, 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 really appreciate, and I know all of us would really appreciate if you are able to also do. What I've got here, let me just share my screen. Just one moment, sorry. Oh, I think I shared the wrong screen. One moment. I'll just share my screen. Here we go. Right screen. There we go. Oh, I think. Oh, you guys aren't able to see that, are you? Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
You can now. Thank you. So we've done the Q&A. I see something has just come up in the chat. Okay, Miguel's asked a question. Are you able to present a shorter version of this presentation at other interagencies? Sure. I guess email us with more information about what it is that you need and things like that. Charlton, do you want to speak to that? Because I know you're doing some stuff.
Yeah, so what I would recommend is having a chat with your local community care provider. So the one I'm presenting on tomorrow will be a highly shortened version, 20 minutes at best. And I probably will just put in the disclaimer that I probably won't cover everything because I just don't have the time to, but it'll be tomorrow at the Penrith Community Care Forum. And so if you can't contact Claire Galvin from Penrith City Council, she can probably get you in details for that. But I mean, what I would recommend, if you want this to be at your local community care forums, contact your local community care provider at council, and hopefully we can arrange something. Although just keep in mind that we own Western Sydney Community Forum only covers the Western Sydney and Nepean Blue Mountains area. You'll have to speak with your SSDs from other districts if you want that same level as well.
Charlton, it's like I might just jump in because Miguel, I know that you're from Canterbury Bankstown. You're one of our counterparts and our colleagues in the SSD world. Absolutely, email me. Even though we cover Western Sydney from the mountains through Parramatta, Cumberland, we're here to support the sector. We're not completely constrained by our funding. We have a diverse income streams. Therefore, we're able to support the sector in different spaces as well, especially in the world of Zoom. It's more feasible these days. So yes, we don't normally do that, but if you need that and you think that would be of benefit, absolutely. And yes, shorter is great. It keeps me shutting my mouth. What I'm going to ask now from all of you, can we please get your feedback? We've got a Mentimeter, same thing. Google, Ecosia, DuckDuckGo, Explorer, is that still a thing? Bing, Yahoo, wherever your web browser's on, type in menti.com and enter this new code, please. I will see this live. Our team will be accessing this live, but this is essentially our feedback. So if this was helpful, please tell us if it was helpful. If it wasn't helpful, even more so, please tell us how we can do better and how we can better support you. This would be, it'd mean the world for us to be able to tailor the support that we can as much as possible. I know we can't go out individually spoon feeding. We don't need a spoon feed. We're all very capable of interpreting information. But if there's things such as this, like big documents such as a Royal Commission, that you need to have analysed and you would like our team to be a part of that process, please reach out to us and tell us through your feedback. You can contact us, as I mentioned, at any point, at any time. It doesn't have to be about the Royal Commission. If there's anything that you need in regards to sector support, we have a wide range of services, including training. And I don't know, Charlton, help me out here. What else do we do? We do a lot, policy work.
Look, basically, whatever your organisation needs help with, regardless of whether it's CHSP oriented or aged care oriented in general, or even outside of that, we support multiple funding streams. And if we don't, we can find out how to. Just one thing, Nadiana, from Fred, the code's not working apparently.
I just noticed that. Give me one moment and I'll double check.
Apologies, everybody. Nadiana's going to get that sorted out as soon as possible. But what we'll do as well is we'll send this code out, and we'll keep the feedback form open for a couple of hours. So once we send out that code as well via email, we'll have that to you as well.
Thanks for that, Charlton. I've just, can you see the code on this? Yes, you can.
Yes.
Thank you. I've just done that. Please try. I'm not sure if that's the same code or a different one.
It's a different one, yep.
It is it. Oh,
no, it's working. No, it's working. It should work.
Okay. Whew, thank you. That was my fault. Apologies if that wasn't working before. I just didn't click start. But I'm in it now. That's the thing. There's only a few questions about the relevance and the helpfulness of it. And look, I will leave you to that. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you to our team, our sector support development team, Charlton, Hazret, Camille. Thank you very much for all of your hard work. We've been working very hard at providing this session for you. We've worked, there's, as Anita said early in the session, thousands of pages to go through and many recommendations, a whole 148 that each of us, along with some of our team members, our interns, I know Thomas and Anissa did a lot of work for us as well. So a big team of us working together. And as my colleague and our colleague, Catherine Madziva, always says, teamwork makes the dream work. And it has. Hopefully this was of benefit for you, and hopefully you were able to get some new information or just a different perspective. As I said at the beginning, please look for more information. Please see other webinars, be a part of other conversations, continue to educate yourself and inform yourself about what's happening in this space.
Just a quick update. We're having a couple of technical difficulties with the Menti form. So I think what we might do moving forward is we'll just send, with the thank you email, we'll send through a form for everybody to fill out.
Thank you for that. I will fix that. It will be fixed in the next 5 minutes. So if you want to just refresh your page in just 2 moments, I will fix that immediately. Sorry, guys, about that. I will get onto it immediately. But without further ado, thank you very much. And good seeing everyone, even if it was via Zoom. Hopefully see you in person sometime soon. Stay safe, guys.